Thank you for joining our first education-focused training on ohyay. Over the last few months, we've seen a big uptick of professors and teachers on the platform, so we're very excited to introduce Kayvon from Stanford and also Mark from Columbia University. Kayvon has been running his parallel computing class on ohyay, and then Mark has been experimenting with data visualization on the platform. We're going to kick off today with a demo from Kayvon of the lecture hall experience. And you can click on the slots below with the little arm raising pictures to join us on screen.
Thanks, Aletta. So hey everybody that's out there. For those that don't know me, my name is Kayvon. I'm a faculty member in computer graphics at Stanford. I really enjoy teaching, and so when I met the ohyay folks way back in the summer of 2020, we ran a fun little party at SIGGRAPH on it, and then I was like, let's give it a shot to see if we can do the whole class in this. So what I've been asked to do is just talk about how I run my classroom experience here. Obviously, everybody's needs will be very different, but the thing to keep in mind is that what I'll show here is not something that ohyay mandates. This is the space that I've created for my own needs in my own classroom. I started teaching in ohyay in a fairly conventional setting. I had 150 students in a large lecture hall class, and I was pretty worried about keeping the energy up. So this quarter, I'm teaching from lecture slides that look a little bit like this. What I've done is, with 150 plus students, there's little value for me to seeing anybody on screen just kind of staring at me. So what I might ask is, for everybody that's in these slots that's appearing on screen, go ahead and click on yourself to get yourself out of there. Normally, this is my status quo, and maybe you might have a TA sitting in those slots, but I do have 150 people off screen. If anybody ever wants to interrupt me or ask me a question, click on one of these raise your hand slots. And at that point, I'll know that you have a question. So unlike Zoom, a raise hand might put something off to the side. Here's a situation where somebody raises their hand, they'll pop into that slot, and I'll say, oh, hey, somebody might have a question. And so in the course of the next 5 minutes, if you have a question, feel free to pop on up there. So I'm just running my normal lecture with slides, and most of the interaction, because I can't see anybody, is actually done through standard text chat. So here's a little chat box. Off to the left, folks can upvote and a lot of the comments that people make. The other use is the students really prefer, at least in my class, to do most of their question answering not via audio, but in fact via this question box. So here's my question box. Since we try and formalize questions a little bit, keeping them out of the chat, and somebody might post a question like, I'm not so sure about that definition, what about X, Y, Z? And so now that is a question sitting there that can be upvoted by anybody in the audience. So you can click on the question to upvote it. So I'm monitoring these information sources throughout lecture. And then the other source of information that I have are these emojis that you see down at the bottom. And so these emojis are what we have established in my class as our convention. So often throughout class, I'm like, hey, is everybody getting it? And you'll see thumbs up, thumbs up. You'll see a flurry of thumbs up. If people are confused, we've kind of standardized on mind blown or thumbs down or crying. And so I get this steady stream, like our convention in class is be active on the emojis so I can get a sense of what's going on. You'll notice that some of these emojis have audio. I put it in here today just for demonstration, but I actually don't have those audio emojis turned on in class because that would be a little disruptive. And so it's actually been fairly surprising to me as an instructor how much feedback I get, even though everybody is off screen or most of the class is off screen. And so that's our basic setup. Not super different from Zoom, but just a few touches here or there that mean that I have all this information right in front of me as I'm talking. There are a few things that we've done. For example, with a single button click, we can remove the slides and we can start bringing people back on stage. I brought Aletta back on stage if we're going to have a more sophisticated discussion in class. We've run activities where students were actually performing, acting out concepts here on stage as well. And then the last part is that we use Zoom Breakout-like functionality all the time. And so what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to send all of you to breakouts. And the one thing to notice is that I have, before my lecture, decided what the breakout topic should be. So when I send you all to breakouts, I've customized the look of these breakouts with certain slides. And so the students have a customized interactive experience for the breakout activity at hand. So what I'll do, just as an example, is I'm going to send everybody to breakouts. You're going to be teamed up in groups of like 3 or 4, I believe. You're all going to appear on screen in these breakouts. And so I just want to show you what that might look like. There's some buttons where you can click in the breakout room to see different slides that I want my students to talk about. And so here's just one example of that.
Hello. Hey there.
We've got chat. Let's see. Can we try some of these buttons?
Sure. I wonder what rotation does.
We're probably going to stop the breakouts in about 5 to 10 seconds. This is how I notify the students. And so, hey, students, if you go ahead and make your way back to the lecture hall using the nav bar on the left, feel free to do so. Or I'll just automatically pull everybody back to the lecture hall in about 10 seconds. So feel free to navigate back, or I'll pull you all back to the lecture hall. The only other thing I wanted to show everybody was how we do the space as a whole. So as you see on the left bar, a number of the rooms that we have are rooms for students at any time 24/7 to hop in and study in. And one thing is that myself and all of my TAs have offices. So I'll bring everybody to an example of my office really quickly. So now everybody's in my office as if this was an office hours. This is a computer graphics class, so a lot of my offices are themed in Pixar-like things. And so in the office hours, there's a chat, and there's also a wait queue. So students can sign up on the wait queue by clicking in that top left box. So you're signing up. If you actually go by your name and click on this little bell thing, you can give me your cell phone so that if you get to the top of the list, I can text you so that you don't have to be stuck by your computer if you're 30 minutes behind everybody else in office hours. So we've set up just a few mechanisms for students to have a little bit better of an office hour experience. The last thing that I'll demonstrate is in office hours, I prefer my students to be talking together, everybody on screen, that kind of experience. But often when students have homework questions, it needs to be done on a one-on-one basis. So I need some mechanism for a student to say, hey, can I talk to you in private? So what I have in this space is a second office here that's a private office that nobody else can see. So you all cannot see my private office in the nav bar because you're not administrators of this space. So one thing that I might do, let's say Aletta asked me, I'd really like to talk about a specific question on the homework. So then what I do as the administrator in ohyay is I just literally move Aletta to my private office where we'll have a private conversation about the homework. I'll do that really quickly to demonstrate. And then when we're done with that discussion, we just both jump back into the main office. And then usually I take a look at my board to see who's coming up next. And that's largely how we run our office hours. So we have both a social aspect and a private aspect to it. I encourage you to take a look at some of the rooms we've designed. One of the more interesting ones is what's called Class Central. And in Class Central, it allows students to create private rooms. Like it's a breakout, but it's private to themselves, and they can invite their friends in so they know that nobody's going to be popping in at any time. And so I've designed that room to have some fun, draggable refreshments. There's a way to do double screen share, which is actually very good for team programming. So 2 students are sharing their screen at once. But I guess that's about it. So maybe we just head back to the lecture hall, and I'll turn it back to Aletta.
Yep. So now we're going to move into a demo by Mark in his space, and he's been able to integrate ohyay with Miro. Some of you may have heard of Miro. It's an online virtual collaboration tool. So we're going to move into his space, and he's going to give us a little spiel about that.
Wow, we all made it. So my name is Mark. I teach at Columbia. I teach 2 classes this semester, which is slowly killing me. And I know it makes me sound privileged to say that I only teach 1 class a semester, but 2 is killing me. I teach a communications class to the PhD students in statistics, my doctorates in statistics. I'm appointed in the School of Journalism, so I'm teaching a data visualization class to the journalists. So this is our crit space. Everybody has their own instantiation, so you can zoom in and do whatever you need to do and move around, but you're not affecting anybody everybody else. And I should say that this is about the size of class that I teach, which is a second reason why you might think I'm whining, right? Oh, wah, wah, I'm teaching 2 classes and wah, wah, they never get over 16 students. But anyway, I'm able to like fill the space with images that are big enough that everybody can be seen if they want to be seen. And I usually have things of different sizes so that if someone is giving a presentation, they can jump up to one of the larger windows at the top. And my adjunct and I tend to stay low and out of the way and let students talk. So we have people coming from the New York Times, we have people coming from various podcasting groups, we have science writers, we have whatever. And so for every class, there's a different room. And the room often speaks to the expertise of the individual speaking. So class 1, for example, was Amanda Cox, who's the data editor at the New York Times. And we held it in the image of the Times Center, which is an auditorium attached to the New York Times building on 8th Avenue. But again, like last night for the data visualization class, most of my students were in New York. So I had some snow scene and things sort of melded in. It feels like it's a flourish, but at the same time, I feel like there's something about creating a space that adds to the purposefulness of why we're meeting. I've been reading this book by Priya Parker called The Art of Gathering, and she makes a point about not just gathering as a category, like it's a class or it's a networking event or it's a tea party, but think about the actual purpose. Like, why are you there and what do you hope to get there? And that in the process, you may make something transformative or memorable or what have you. There's something about the capacity of a space like this and being able to author it in a way that responds to the interactivity that you want to have with your students, which is really quite powerful and does take us from a category of thing, a class, to a purpose for why we're here. Like for this, we are here to critique. And so we need to be able to zoom in, zoom out. There's stuff that we can do here that we can't really do in other formats. I should also say that we're holding the Computation Plus Journalism Conference on the 19th of February in ohyay with as much of a physical metaphor for an actual conference as I can get. So we have a lobby space, we have a ballroom for the plenary sessions, we have contributed session rooms. The ohyay folks, who are amazing to work with, are helping me get a little timer set up so that everyone only gets 15 minutes, then they get yanked from the stage, things like that. Does anyone have any questions?
Mark, was it hard to integrate Miro?
The hardest thing was with the educational license of Miro, you have the capacity to embed it. And it'll give you a link. And the only complication is that that link is an iframe. And so you have to take it out of the iframe and just put the actual link in there and it's fine. It happens pretty quickly. I was surprised that it would work so easily and so well. The platform itself is really powerful. The authoring of it is fairly direct for basic things. And then there's this whole other thing that happens when you want things like stuff that shuts down or whatever that is doable in the graphical user interface that I hadn't anticipated being doable. So there's a lot of functionality that's available here to create an experience that is unique and memorable, and I think adds considerably to the educational experience. I find that my students are exhausted of being on Zoom all day, literally exhausted, because I don't know if you know much about journalism classes, they can be a marathon. They'll go for 6 hours at a time. And there's a point at which you say enough, right? So they come to my class and they're just overwhelmed with being virtual and they're kind of running to their limit now after so much time in this state. And to provide them with a space that is thoughtful and allows them some agency and what have you is I think really powerful. So I'm going to shut up and let someone else talk.
Does anyone else have questions before we move to a demo of how to construct your own lecture hall in ohyay?
I have a quick question for Kayvon. So this all, how rapidly did you refine your lecture process and stuff? This platform hasn't been around very long. That felt really refined and pretty put together.
Well, first of all, thanks. I mean, in full disclosure, I consult for ohyay 1 day a week. So my integration with the ohyay folks is quite tight. But I created Aletta created this room under construction, not at the bottom. And so I'm happy to create a room on the fly here if we want to try that. I mean,
Yeah, let's all go there.
a fair level of polish by the end of the hour.
So click to go into under construction at the bottom of the left-hand side room navigator. And I can drag you if you can't find that.
To sort of make some recommendations on what we should create, because I imagine other folks' lecture experience or in-classroom workshop experience is very different from mine. And so just as a demonstration, we can brainstorm and create something together if that would be of interest. So we want a poster booth. Sure, yeah, that's actually something that I've been meaning to create for myself. Let's see here. So what aspects of the experience do you want? Let's just say it's like a 2-person poster. I don't know, just because often people work in teams of 2. So the next thing I would do is I want to create a spot here for someone else that would join me on my team. To not embarrass anybody, I'll throw Mark up here as well. So now this is like the poster by Mark and I. So maybe we'll stand off to the side. I personally happen to be a rounded corner person, so I'm going to round off our corners here because this is bothering me. So how do we want the students to present their posters? So I can think of a few options. One option is that they could screen share. Let me create a screen share element. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to set its background color to 0.5 just so you can see where it is. So this is something that will be my screen share. And I'll go ahead and share just my whole desktop into that. Now, unfortunately, it's going to get a little meta. So this is the editor that I have in front of me. Now you can see the space. So I'm just manipulating the screen share element. So as we keep going with the poster, were you thinking that we should just do a screen share to share the poster, or we could, I mean, normally I would have my students, is there a view to screen share, to view the screen share full screen?
By default, the screen share doesn't go to a small window. The screen share will take up the space and move everybody down.
Yeah, that's right. So let me do that real quick. So this is like your default screen share in ohyay, but I decided because this one might be better to have a custom screen share element to it. Let me go find a poster somewhere. Let's just do this. I'm going to open up Keynote. I'm going to open up a slide from lecture recently. Let me just export this as images for now. Just throw this all on my desktop. So let's go ahead and I'm going to take an image now that I'm going to choose from my desktop, and I'm going to make that poster an image here. So I outputted all my JPEGs to here. So let's just use this image as our fictitious poster going forward. So here's my poster now for our poster session. I'll bring this back to the front so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So you can kind of see how this might work. This room is set up so that the reactions actually go over the entire screen by default. I think that's probably okay in a social setting like a poster presentation. You might have noticed that in my lecture hall, I moved it off to the side. I think in most working scenarios, you almost always need a chat box of some sort. So I always like to create a chat box off to the side somewhere. So I'll make a chat box here. Obviously, this is not laid out with particular aesthetics like the lecture hall was. We can always add a background image to this. So I'll choose maybe the nice background that Mark had in one of his things. I'll add a little bit of visual styling here for drop shadows to separate us from that background. And you could, see a room is slowly emerging. I'm actually really interested to do a big poster presentation, not in my class, but we have one at Stanford coming up for 200 students. So it'll be fun to do a poster presentation with 200 students and then design a map for that whole space where everybody can see where everybody is at any one point. That's where it gets really fun to start designing social experiences. But as you can see, we got to something that might be workable in about 5 to 8 minutes. And there's a bunch of little things that we'd probably do to make this space a little bit more engaging or a little bit more visually pleasing if we had more time.
And I just saw your question. We don't have any other specific trainings for spaces like museums, but that's a really good idea. So I'm going to pass it on to the team.
Sorry to cut in. I was just, Andy and I have been talking about, I suppose it's in fact similar. It's helpful, Kayvon and Mark, to have this basic outline. Well, I suppose I was wondering about one step further to having these kind of rooms that can be joined by people where there's not a professor or somebody leading people through the space, but it's something otherwise that
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's actually where like a lot of my interest right now is to try and make these ohyay spaces self-discoverable. So my partner and I, we ran a New Year's Eve party for 150 people. And I certainly wasn't navigating people through the party. So we did a bunch of cool stuff where we had a top level map. So we actually laid out a floor plan of the entire ohyay space. And from that floor plan view, you could see who was in every room. You could get a preview of the discussion, mouse overs of the thumbnail, could even engage audio. So you could peek into the audio of the room. It's quite fun actually to start. I mean, it's basically a mini computer game engine. It's like a 2D computer game engine, really, is what ohyay is, crossed with a video conferencing system.
And we're going to be hosting, like I said, a full conference where things will be happening at certain times, but it's going to be a conference setting where you go and attend wherever you want, and there will be parallel sessions, and then lobby areas and private rooms that you can go to if you want to just hang out with people and have separate talks. So I'm having entirely too much fun designing these things, frankly. So.
Question about how do I manage breakout rooms? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, most of my breakout activities are in the context of a lecture. They're not like recitation kind of breakouts where they would be long running ones. So my breakouts in lecture are, I have the room set up in advance of lecture. So I kind of choose the slide or choose the visual, the prompt in advance of lecture. So I make sure that room is ready to go. I send students out in small groups for them to talk about the problem at hand. And usually I let them go for about 3 to 5 minutes. And then I kind of shout at everybody. You know, ohyay gives me this ability to kind of just shout into all the rooms. I kind of say, hey, look, we're going to kind of wrap this up in about 15 or 30 seconds. And then we resume the lecture, kind of like what we did in the demo today. The other use case of ohyay is not what I have in my class, because right now I'm teaching some big kind of conventional lecture classes, but more of like at least in a computer science or engineering field, like the recitation session. And the way that works is that there's a room for every student shows up to class, they just go into a room. There is no plenary lecture. And so they are working with their team in a room, someone screen sharing, they're coding together or whatnot. And the lecturers just wander throughout the rooms and say, hey, how's it going? Or the lecturers just sit in their own room and students come there if they have questions. I saw the question pop up in the reactions about, can the screen share go into all rooms? And yes, like basically I can take any room and put it into any other room. Here's an example really quickly. You can just think about it as conceptually, there are feeds, there are streams, there's audio, and there's video, and you can attach any of those streams into another room. So for example, if we wanted to preview the lecture hall, this is an actual live preview of the lecture hall. So if you sit here, watch this, I'm going to go to the lecture hall and you will see me. I'll turn up the audio so you'll be able to hear me. So hey everybody, I'm in the lecture hall, and you can probably hear me from the breakout room under construction that I created. So hopefully you could hear me do that. So that's just treating another room just like any other participant in the space.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. This is a really good way to do side conversations. So what I'll do is in the breakout room, you'll press a button saying, I want to have a side conversation with someone. I'll kick those two people into a private breakout room, but they'll have a view into the main breakout room with audio at some lower volume. So it's an equivalent to like stepping aside in a room without losing context to what your peers are doing. So that's one of my favorite kind of design paradigms that I use a lot in my spaces, which is the ability to step aside for a second. Because if you go completely to another room, you kind of lose context.
I think we had a question from Ben Kayvon about the learning curve, learning ohyay.
Yeah, I mean, it's in some ways, it is a tool that already has a lot more functionality than something like Keynote or PowerPoint. And it has basically already more sliders and stuff than Keynote or PowerPoint. So the learning curve to get a room like this is almost nothing. Like you'd be able to get to a point to make this in an afternoon. It's just dragging and dropping things. The learning curve to set up a few of the slightly more sophisticated behaviors that I'm talking about would be, I would say, difficult to do on your own right now because of the lack of documentation, but would be very easy to do with 5 minutes of conversation, with someone like Aletta or myself on Discord. So I think for now, I won't speak for ohyay, but I think the philosophy has been interact via social communication as opposed to producing massive amounts of documentation of a platform that's rapidly evolving, which would make the documentation stale very quickly. So the best course of action is if you have a question, just ask it on Discord and somebody will answer your question very quickly. And the answer is usually, in 5 minutes worth of work, you can create what you wanted. Like, in fact, I'll show you how I'll create one of these rooms. Actually, if maybe somebody else could answer a question or something, but I'm going to create one of these side channel rooms just over the next 2 minutes, and I'll just do a demo of that real quick.
I saw the question about building a custom map. We're actually currently working on a tutorial for that specific topic. And it's a little bit more complex than setting up your room navigator, but can be a lot more fun. You can set up a campus map and have people click into buildings, etc. And if you're not on Discord already, I can drop the link in here. But that's where we're talking to the majority of our creators. And we also just set up a channel for educators specifically. So you can ask Kayvon questions there.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm back. Sorry about that. So if you click here in 1 second, let me just link this in. Okay, let me test this just to make sure it works. Yeah, it does. Okay, so if you want, like, imagine we were having a conversation here, like say an office hours or a group study session. Maybe a few of you sparsely, one at a time or a couple at a time. If you click here to go to the side room, you'll be taken to a side conversation without really leaving this conversation. So feel free to click on it. And you can, when you go there, go ahead and click, you'll be able to hear me. You can have your own conversation in that room, but you're still engaged with the audio and the visuals of anything that's going on in the main room. So I really like that paradigm a lot as a way to step aside. So, and if you click the preview, you can just come back here and you're in the main room with me. So mentally, just think about it as ohyay is like Keynote. You do whatever you want. And instead of hooking up images and text, video feeds and audio feeds can be one form of media that just gets hooked up in the scene graph. That's how I think about it. And just like any other room can be a video feed, a YouTube video can be a video feed as well. So like if I want to watch a movie in class or a computer graphics class, we watch a lot of short clips and animations. I just embed a movie in the ohyay space and we all watch it together.
Would anyone want to share how they're setting up their class or any questions they have as they start to dive into ohyay?
For me, it's all in the future.
Yeah.
I mentioned in a chat that Ben Milius and I were developing a course that's a course in the Anthropocene, where students would actually be building rooms as part of the course to display some manifestation of their sense of this period in Earth history. So that's why I said, having some kind of distilled design template, that then students could then dive into. And those who are more adept can obviously just dive in right away, but this will be for students in the humanities, sciences, not necessarily people who are like Mark or Kayvon.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the easiest way to have a chance at that would be you would just make a template and then they would start with something that looked like this, right? And the first is you just get comfortable with maybe resizing some stuff or changing the layout, and then you start adding some of your own elements.
Yeah.
I know that we're also working on creating a beginner mode for the tool, so you can have a like a beginner stripped down interface. So there's not as many advanced capabilities that are overwhelming in the tool.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be getting 1/10 the options mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, I also wanted to ask something. So Katie and I are teaching assistants for an upcoming class at MIT taught by Arvind Satyanarayan about data visualization, and we decided to use ohyay this semester. My question is, how can we record the lectures? And I know it's possible, but my question is like, is there a way for students to access those recordings afterward?
Sure. Maybe I'll take that one real quick because that's part of my normal flow. So ohyay has record in the cloud, just like anybody else. And then once the recording is done, I download the video file, the MP4 from ohyay, and then I push it back up to standard lecture delivery services by Stanford. So my workflow is record to the cloud, download video file, and then upload it, in Stanford's case, back to Panopto, which is the place, the sort of the approved mechanism for all of our Stanford students to watch their lectures. So And one of the nice things about Panopto is once I get it up in there, then I can rely on all of their services for streaming, like after the fact delivery or closed captioning and stuff like that in case there's accessibility needs. The one thing that is not just like sitting there is real-time closed captioning if you are required to have that by your institution. If it needs to be there, I think that could get built pretty quickly, actually. So, because I think a number of folks have talked about it already. But my closed captioning solution is after the fact right now.
So does ohyay on its own have storage, like data storage, when those recordings are stored in the cloud?
My understanding is that right now, no. But I would not, you don't want to use ohyay to host that for the long term going forward. You should download your lectures from ohyay and put them on a more permanent storage or lecture distribution mechanism, because the students do not have access to download that MP4 file themselves.
Oh, I see.
Right. So as the administrator, as the lecturer, just download it and then push it to wherever you would normally push your Zoom lecture videos or stuff like that.
Thank you.
I think it's also worth noting that Kayvon has worked with us to build features that didn't already exist in ohyay that worked for his lecture. So we are very open to working with you and evolving your class as you go on and as you need more things. We can just literally build it. We have an amazing engineering team.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
It's great.
I think we can move into the portion where you can just explore around and click on the room navigator to the left and click into different rooms. And all of these rooms are available in our workspace gallery. So I'll send that out after the event, and you guys can just import all of these rooms directly into your spaces. But thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. And reach out to us if you're interested in learning more.